Okay, so this video talks about tone change in the Hmong language. As you may already know, Hmong tones, they help to identify the meaning of a word, just like a vowel or consonant works together they work together with a tone. And so it's different than in English. For example, in English we use tones to express emotion, but in Hmong they actually identify the word. Something you may or may not know is that tones change sometimes based on the word that precedes them. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over why that works, how it works, what the general rules are, and then after looking at some examples, we'll look at what it means for someone who's learning. Hopefully it's helpful. So here we have an explanation of what affects the tone changes. First we'll discuss the general overall rules, which are pretty abstract, and then afterwards we can go through some examples, which really, for me personally, has helped me to understand how it works. As you can see here, the box that I have highlighted, there's a line that says after a high tone B or a falling tone J. So when there's a word that has either high tone B or a falling tone J, then the next word will be affected in the following ways. So for example, if the next word ends in a J tone, it will turn to a G tone. If it ends in an S tone, also a G tone. If it ends in an M tone, also a G tone. However, if it ends in a V tone, it will turn to no tone. If it ends in a no tone, if it has no tone at the end of the word, it will change to an S tone. And then the final rule here, number 4, no classifier or noun used as a classifier, regardless of its own tone, affects a tone change in a following word. So if you're like me, that all seems very abstract, but here's some examples to help kind of visualize it. So first off, we have illustrations and exceptions. First, we have the illustrations of how a J tone turns into a G tone. So let's look at this first word here, jua. Jua by itself is a J tone, and it means the number 9. But if we were to put a word before that, if you look on the right hand side, sia, jua. Sia has a B tone, so it affects the word jua and changes it from a J tone to a G tone, like you can see right there. Another example, de, the word for water here, has a J tone. But if you have the word boat before it, which has a J tone, remember it's the J or the B tones that affect the following words, then it becomes ga, de, G tone. So it changes from a J tone here to a G tone. Now there's quite a few examples. There's some exceptions here. If you look at this the second example under exceptions, na has a B tone, so you would expect the following word blay to turn into blay, nam blay, but it doesn't. You just say nam blay. Okay, so there's a few exceptions to that. The S also turns into a G tone when it's preceded by a word with a B or J tone. So here we have jaw, which says treadmill, not a treadmill for running on, but it's a treadmill that treads or crushes different types of grains like corn and rice, etc. Jaw is an S tone, but if you put the word J before it, it becomes J, jaw. It changes that S tone to a G tone, like you can see in the illustration there. And there's plenty of examples. There's also exceptions. Bei tu tu should be bei tu tu, but instead bei tu tu, just that's what it is. So there's a few for exceptions. Another exception in a common word is ba gu. Ba gu we would expect to be ba gu, but it's not. Okay, next the M turns into a G, so to J here is to scold. but if you put the reciprocal word for to do something back and forth before it, it becomes shi jay, turns into a G. There's a few different examples. Another one, ta, becomes shi ta. It's not shi ta, it's shi ta. However, there's still exceptions. Jiao has a J tone, so you'd expect the following word to be tu, but instead it's still jiao tu. If you're feeling confused right now, at the end we'll talk about why, what part of this we should learn and what maybe we wouldn't necessarily memorize. Next we have the V tone turns into a no tone. So for example, the word ja, C-A-V, is a log, but underneath the log, Q-A-B, that B tone, it gets rid of the V tone and leaves no tone. So it'd be ka, ja, ka, ja. Same, this is quite a common one, jaw, C-O-V is a classifier for groups. But if you say E before it, that V tone drops. It goes to E jaw, as you can see there. Plenty of examples, a few exceptions. Gai, jaw, we don't drop the V in jaw. Very few languages are consistent. This second here exception, saw shia. Most people actually don't say, as far as I've seen, don't say saw shia. They say saw shia. So it really does change the tone. So you have to pay attention. And finally we have no tone turns into an S tone. So chao by itself is the word for a place, but when you change it to the word for country, proceeding with the word te, T-E-B, that B tone changes it to chao with an S tone. So as you can see, there's the unmarked tone turns into an S tone, and that happens in quite a few cases. As you can see, there's exceptions too, won't go over any. And finally, rule number 4, no classifier or noun functioning as a classifier produces a tone change. So, lo lia, we would expect the B to change this to a G, lo lia, but it doesn't. Lo lia. And there's other examples. Ilu jaw, jaw we would expect to turn into a G as well, but it doesn't. Ilu jaw. Keep in mind too that some people pronounce things somewhat differently depending on where you go to. So none of these rules are hard, fast, or solid. So no, in a second we'll talk about what we should learn and how learning some of these things, these concepts can help us. And finally we have the question, why is it important? One thing to keep in mind is, even though it is important to get the correct tone, saying the correct tone in these cases, saying the correct tone change, for example, memorizing all the words, will help you to sound more like a native speaker. But if you, for example, the classifier for person, T-U-S, to, but again, if you say one person, ito, with turns to a G tone, if you forget that and you say ito, it doesn't sound natural, but you'll definitely be understood because people understand that word do. So again, why is it important to learn some of these things? Well, it's important to learn the concept because oftentimes, for example, you'll be searching in a dictionary and you'll find, or you'll be reading something, or maybe someone will say something to you, and the tone will be different than that which is listed in the dictionary. So perhaps you're reading in a book and you see a word and you think, oh, I haven't run into that word, T-U-G, tu. And then you look in a dictionary and you can't find it, or you find it as a strange definition. Well, if you understand how tone change works, you'll be able to recognize, oh, well, the word before E changes it to tu, so really it is tu. Taking a little bit of time to understand the concept is really helpful. I don't know if memorizing all the rules is really helpful. I'll leave that one to you, but hopefully some of this information is useful.